It's always a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm also pleased to see the Minister in his place, who may feel at times in his life he spends perhaps a disproportionate amount of time dealing with affairs of Kent, but we are always grateful for his attention. And I'm happy to assure him at the start of this short debate that this is a different kind of rail debate from the one he may be used to, in that I imagine, indeed I know, that most of the debates in this chamber about rail services will be a cry of rage about unreliability, delays, strikes, and how colleagues' constituents are at the end of their tether. By contrast, this debate is about a hugely successful service, but one which is going to be choked by that very success and popularity unless ministers and the industry take decisive action very soon. So let me start with the good news. The high-speed services, these are facts from South Eastern, who operate it. Since HS1 started under South Eastern in 2009, it's carried more than 100 million passengers. The passenger satisfaction over that period has been higher than 90%, which the Minister will be painfully aware is an extremely good figure compared to some other lines. It's been calculated that it's delivered a £1 billion boost to the Kent tourism economy and indirectly supporting up to 72,000 jobs. Clearly, one of the main reasons for this is the speed. It's a high-speed operation. From my own constituency, the journey between Ashford and London is now 38 minutes. It used to be routinely 81 minutes, so it's very significant, and I observe other colleagues from Kent around the room who will no doubt have similar stories. And indeed, of course, it has a hugely positive environmental effect as well. The calculation is that something like 6,000 cars a year are taken off the road every year because of the high usage of this service. And if I may be parochial for a second, it has contributed hugely to the economic growth in my own constituency in Ashford. There are 7 major development projects that have either been built or are being built around the station: offices, leisure, shopping and education facilities. And there is a very direct business benefit to this because it's only 38 minutes from using the high-speed train from Ashford to St Pancras International, while at the same time office rents are 73% lower than in London. Clearly, many businesses find Ashford an extremely attractive place to do business. And, of course, I welcome all of that. My last bit of positivity, if I can keep the Minister cheerful for a few more minutes, is about a study about what has become an increasingly key industry for the whole of Kent, which is tourism. HS1 themselves did a tourism impact study a couple of years ago, and the figures are stark and very, very encouraging. The value of tourism, of the visitor economy to Kent, grew over £1 billion over the past decade, from £2.4 billion to £3.6 billion, supporting the 72,000 jobs I've already mentioned. And to put that in perspective, that is 10% of all the jobs in Kent. It is a really, really significant industry. And sustained investment, not just in the tourism industry itself, but also in transport links, of which High-Speed 1 is one of the most important, has led to these significant increase. And the study determined the perceived impact that HS1 has had on this particular business. Over half of the respondents in the tourist industry in Kent believe that HS1 has had a positive impact on their business. In terms of the reasons for this, the most obvious one obviously is speed to reach the destination. but also, perhaps more subtly, the ability to attract visitors from further afield. So it actually increases the range of attraction for Kent. Of course.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. I congratulate him on securing this debate. I don't think there's any doubt, certainly in my mind, that HS1 has been good for the county. But would my right honourable friend agree with me that before proceeding any further with HS2, we do need to tackle the challenges of HS1, which has, in many respects, become synonymous with costs and overcrowding?
I am about to come on to the issue of overcrowding, as my honourable friend would expect, since that was my principal reason for calling this debate. I would also make the point that when he says before we proceed with HS2, I should say in this context that I'm in favour of HS2, partly because I observe the benefits, the benefits I'm going through now of HS1 on Kent, and I would not wish to deprive other parts of the country of the benefits that high-speed rail services can bring. So I think, to some extent, these two debates need to be separated. As I say, HS1 has been hugely good for Kent, and I wish that to continue, and therefore I'm urging the government to address what will be a looming and imminent problem if they don't. But I think the HS2 debate is to some extent rather a different one. To return to the tourism industry, 71% of the respondents within the industry believe that leisure tourism in Kent has increased as a result of HS1. It's been particularly an influencing factor in attracting couples and family groups, both young families and those with older children, and indeed extended families, and that in itself has contributed to a widening and deepening of the Kent tourism economy. So although I emphasise tourism because although by and large it's regarded reasonably enough as a commuter network, and clearly it is of huge benefit to commuters because it gives them many hours, days, weeks of their life back because of the reduced times of the journey. Actually, it has a measurable and direct economic impact beyond that as well. So overall, it is one of the success stories of the rail network, providing travel that's not only fast but more reliable than most lines. And as I say, this is reflected in the passenger satisfaction surveys. But that, as I reach the halfway point, is the limit of the positive news I wish to bring the Minister. Now, the bad news. The bad news is that the service has become too popular for its own good. Overcrowding is a serious problem and a growing problem throughout the line. The operator, Southeastern, has tried to compensate by changing the number of carriages on the most popular peak hour services and improving the repairs and maintenance programme so that more of the rolling stock is available at any one time. But this is not enough. Essentially, we need more rolling stock on the line. Passenger numbers have grown by an average of 11.7% every year since 2010, and there's no evidence that this increase in demand is going to slow down in the future. Indeed, with major housing developments planned not just in Ashford but in other towns in Kent along the line, we can expect the opposite. I give way to my honourable friend.
This important debate. While I agree with everything he says about the benefits of HS1 from an economic perspective, Kent constituents from Snodland and Chatham who pay £5,500 for their annual ticket to use HS1 should at least expect a seat and a working toilet on their train into London. But does he not agree with me that with the growth in house building across the area, that there are communities like Snodden that are being built specifically around the services from HS1?
My honourable friend is exactly right. That, and indeed, the point she makes about season ticket prices is a good one. It's obviously slightly more expensive for my constituents, and the further towards the coast you get, the more expensive the season tickets get. And as the inability to sit down spreads along the line, then the difficulty she rightly points out will no doubt get worse for people. So the need for extra train services and longer trains is clear. I give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you for giving way. I entirely agree with what the right honourable gentleman was saying. And the service going through Gravesend, why on earth do people who are paying the most for their tickets standing up for 23 minutes from Gravesend or indeed 38 from Ashford? I mean, it is completely wrong and something needs to be done about it.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He makes a very good point. On current projections, 31 high-speed services a day will be full to capacity by 2025, meaning that those passengers who are rightly complaining about having to stand every day, having paid for expensive season tickets, may not be even to be able to get on the train. So things, as it stands, will get worse rather than better. And on top of those 31 inaccessible services, there will be another 25 trains a day that will be standing room only. So I think the scale of the problem is becoming clear. I've obviously spoken to the rail industry in preparing for this debate, and Hitachi make interesting points that the trains on it are specifically designed for the HS1 line and the South Eastern conventional network. It uses 2 different power sources, 3 different signalling systems on board, and so standard UK network trains can't be used. It is a special issue of how you extend or replace the rolling stock on this particular line. And Hitachi themselves say they would advise to plan for a lead time of the order of 4 years before new train sets can come into service on the line, when you consider design time, procurement, testing and approvals for what is a specialist product. And for this timescale to be achieved, clarity on the future of the franchise at the earliest opportunity is vital. And of course the Minister will be aware of the history of the franchise, the difficulties there have been, and indeed the succession of relatively short-term solutions that have been brought into being to keep the franchise operating. And I appreciate the problems he and indeed the operator in the industry more widely has faced with the franchise, and this debate is not the time to discuss those. But what I would plead for is that that some long-term thinking can now be introduced, that if we continue simply to apply short-term patches to the franchising or whatever is going to succeed franchising after the review is published, that now is the time on this specific issue actually to impose some long-term thinking and actually saying we need to start planning now if we're going to avoid something that would be tragic for the rail industry. It would be turning a success into a failure in the future. So I would give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. He knows, he mentioned in his opening remarks the question of tourism. And he knows, because I've bored for England on the subject, that I'm looking forward to the opening of Manston as an airport once again. And the synergy between Manston and Ramsgate and, of course, Port of Dover, which is a highly successful cruise liner port. If we are going to attract the tourism, it is absolutely vital that we have reliable train services that are swift, connection with London. And in terms of connectivity, would my right honourable friend agree that we have to urge the Minister to recognise that we need these trains now, not in 10 years' time?
I completely agree with my honourable friend in all but one particular, in that I can say he never bores for Britain on any subject, and I would disagree with him about that, but completely agree with the point he makes. So, to conclude, I have 2 requests of the Minister this morning. First, to acknowledge that this is not just a problem, but a problem that needs to be addressed now, that cannot be kicked into the long grass any longer. And secondly, to commit to devising a solution that will allow passengers to continue to enjoy the many benefits of high-speed rail. We need decisions very soon to prevent one of the great successes of the rail industry over the last 10, 20 years to being tarnished by short-term decision-making. So I would urge the Minister to make those commitments this morning, and I'm grateful to colleagues who contributed to this debate.